I'm Megan Davis, 31, and last Sunday my world collapsed over pot roast. Leave your keys and get out, my father demanded, his voice cold as the untouched mashed potatoes on my plate. This house belongs to the family now. My mother nodded silently, avoiding my eyes. The property I'd purchased for them 6 months ago, my gift, was apparently no longer mine. I placed the keys on the table and left quietly, despite knowing I was still legally the owner. Something had been off with my parents lately, but I never saw it coming. If you're watching from somewhere dealing with family financial drama, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I handled what happened the next morning when the mortgage company called. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, where my parents, Robert and Susan Davis, raised 3 children on my father's teacher salary and my mother's part-time bookkeeping income. We weren't poor, but money was always discussed in hushed, worried tones at our kitchen table after we kids went to bed. I learned early that financial security wasn't a given, it was something you built carefully, deliberately. While my siblings Ryan and Heather seemed content with average grades and plenty of social time, I buried myself in books and part-time jobs. By 16, I was managing a coffee shop on weekends. At 18, I received a partial scholarship to the University of Washington, covering the rest with 3 simultaneous jobs. I graduated with a business degree, 0 debt, and an entry-level position at a real estate investment firm. You work too hard, my mother would say during our weekly calls. There's more to life than money, Megan. But it wasn't about money. It was about independence. I'd watched how financial stress had etched permanent worry lines into my parents' faces. I wanted different for myself, and ironically, for them too. Over 8 years, I climbed from assistant to associate to partner. I specialized in identifying undervalued properties, renovating them, and either selling for profit or maintaining them as income properties. By 30, my portfolio included 12 properties and a reputation as one of Seattle's sharpest young investors. My siblings took different paths. Ryan, 2 years younger, bounced between bartending jobs, always with big plans that never materialized. Heather, the youngest at 26, worked as a preschool teacher, steady but always struggling with student loans. My parents helped them both financially, repeatedly. Ryan needed bail money after a DUI. Heather needed first and last month's rent, then car repairs, then dental work. They're still finding themselves, Mom would explain when I questioned these bailouts. Not everyone knows their path as early as you did. I never received financial help after college, nor did I ask for it. Instead, I became the family success story, mentioned proudly at neighborhood barbecues, but with an undercurrent of something else, something that felt increasingly like resentment. 6 months ago, when my parents' landlord decided to sell the modest house they'd rented for 15 years, I saw an opportunity. Their lease was ending, rents were skyrocketing in Seattle, and they were approaching retirement age with inadequate savings. I want to buy you a house, I told them over dinner. Not just any house, the one you've always talked about. They'd spent years driving through the Queen and neighborhood, pointing out a particular craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch and garden space. Through an industry contact, I learned it was coming on the market. At $780,000, it was a stretch even for me, but I made it work. The day I handed them the keys, my mother cried, and my father hugged me for the first time in years. We never thought we'd have something like this, he said, voice breaking. I arranged a mortgage under my name, but set up a bank account for them to transfer a token rent amount each month, far below market rate, just enough to give them dignity and ownership in the process. We agreed they'd live there as long as they wanted, and someday, when they no longer needed it, we'd decide together what to do with it. For 3 months, everything seemed perfect. Sunday dinners became a tradition in their new dining room. My mother planted the garden she'd always wanted. My father claimed the basement as his workshop. Then things began to shift. First, it was small comments. "This is really the family home now," my mother would say when giving neighbors tours. Not Megan's generous gift, or the house our daughter bought us, but our family home. My father started making renovation decisions without consulting me, despite our agreement about major changes. Ryan and Heather began spending more time there, which initially seemed positive. The house was bringing our somewhat distant family together. But I noticed whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. My siblings had keys made without asking me. Ryan brought a girlfriend who stayed for weeks in the guest room I occasionally used. For weeks ago, I stopped by unannounced and overheard my father on the phone. No, the house is completely paid for. No mortgage at all. A blatant lie that made my stomach twist. When questioned, he brushed it off as simplifying things for an old friend. 2 weeks ago, I discovered mail addressed to me had been opened, mortgage statements and property tax notices. When confronted, my mother claimed, "We thought these were joint documents since we live here." 1 week ago, Ryan asked if I would co-sign a business loan for a guaranteed opportunity. When I declined, suggesting he build credit first, his response was telling, "You have this whole house you're not even using. You can spare some credit for family." The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Last Sunday began like many others. I arrived at my parents' house, technically my house, at 3 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and a bakery cheesecake. Mom greeted me with her usual hug, though it felt perfunctory. "Everyone's already here," she said, leading me to the dining room where my father was carving a roast. Ryan and Heather sat at the table, along with Ryan's latest girlfriend, Brittany, whom I'd only met twice. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim stopped by too, Mom added, gesturing to my father's sister and her husband sitting awkwardly in the living room. They rarely attended our family dinners. "Nice surprise," I said, though something felt off. Carol avoided eye contact, focusing intensely on arranging napkins that were already perfectly placed. The conversation during dinner remained superficial: neighborhood news, Seattle's endless rain, Brittany's new job at a downtown bar. Ryan seemed unusually interested in my work. "So how many properties do you own now, Meg?" he asked, pouring his third glass of wine. 12 income properties, plus my apartment and this house," I answered, noticing how he flinched at the words "this house." "Must be nice," Heather muttered. Dad cleared his throat. "Speaking of this house, we've been thinking about making some changes." "What kind of changes?" I asked, setting down my fork. "The upstairs bathroom needs renovation," Mom interjected quickly. "And we're thinking about converting the attic into another bedroom." "That's a big project," I said carefully. "We should discuss the budget and—" "We don't need your permission for every little thing," Ryan interrupted. "It's their house." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Even Brittany looked down at her plate. "Actually," I said gently, "legally it is my house. I'm happy to discuss renovations, but—" "That's exactly the problem," my father said, his voice rising. "Always reminding us whose house it really is." "Dad, I didn't mean—" "We know what you meant," he continued, pushing his plate away. "You give with one hand and control with the other. You've done it your whole life." My mother touched his arm. "Robert, maybe after dinner." "No, Susan. It's time." He turned back to me. "Your mother and I have discussed this with the family. This constant power dynamic isn't working." "Power dynamic?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "I bought this house as a gift. I've never tried to control how you live here. You make us pay rent," Ryan exclaimed. "A token amount that's about a quarter of market rate," I countered, feeling heat rise in my face. "The point is," my father continued, "this should be a family home. Your grandparents helped us when we were starting out. That's what family does." "I know, and that's why I bought." "You bought it to show off," Heather interrupted. "To remind everyone how successful you are while the rest of us struggle." I looked around the table, stunned. Even Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim were nodding slightly. "That's not true," I said, my voice barely audible. "I bought it because I love you." "If you loved us," my father said, "you'd put the house in our names. Let it be truly ours." The demand hung in the air, I thought about the $780,000 mortgage in my name, the property taxes, the insurance, all my responsibility. The legal implications of transferring ownership were enormous. Dad, I can't just sign over a house. There are mortgages, legal issues. There's always an excuse with you, my mother said, surprising me with her sudden sharpness. Always conditions. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out papers. We've already contacted a lawyer. These transfer documents just need your signature. I skimmed the papers, my hand trembling. They wanted me to sign over complete ownership while keeping the mortgage in my name. This isn't legally sound, I said. I'd be responsible for a loan on property I don't own. There it is, Ryan sneered. Always about the money. It's not about money, I insisted. It's about fairness. About reality. I've given you a place to live rent-free for all practical purposes. And lord it over us at every opportunity, my father said, standing suddenly. We're done with your charity. We're done with your conditions. He walked to the drawer of the antique hutch I'd helped my mother select, pulled out a set of papers, and slammed them on the table. We've already applied for a home equity loan. The house has substantial equity we can access. I felt the blood drain from my face. You can't take out a loan on a house you don't own. We've lived here for 6 months, my mother said. We've established residency. The loan officer said. The loan officer is mistaken, I interrupted, my professional knowledge kicking in despite my emotional turmoil. And attempting to take out a loan on property you don't own is fraud. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. My father's face reddened. Leave your keys and get out, he demanded, voice shaking. This house belongs to the family now. My mother nodded in agreement, eyes cold. I could have argued. Could have reminded them of the legal realities. Could have threatened. Instead, I placed my house keys on the table, keys to a property legally still mine, and stood up. I love you all, I said quietly. I always have. I never thought my success would become something you'd resent rather than celebrate. No one spoke as I collected my purse and jacket. As I reached the door, Aunt Carol finally spoke. Your parents deserve security in their retirement, Megan. After all they've done for you. I turned back one last time. I bought this house to give them exactly that security. I never expected gratitude, but I also never expected this. I drove home in silence, tears blurring the familiar Seattle streets. The rain started halfway home, matching the storm inside me. Monday morning, I woke to my phone vibrating on my nightstand. Groggy and emotionally drained, I almost ignored it. The caller ID showed Pacific Northwest Mortgage. Ms. Davis, a professional voice greeted me. This is Thomas Wilson from Pacific Northwest Mortgage. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your Queen and property account. I sat up, instantly alert. What kind of activity? We received paperwork attempting to transfer the title while maintaining the loan in your name, followed by an application for a home equity line of credit for $500,000. My stomach dropped. I didn't authorize either of those. We suspected as much, Thomas continued. The signatures didn't match our records, and the procedure being attempted isn't standard or legal. We've flagged it in our system. What exactly did they apply for? I asked, pacing my apartment. The application stated intent to access the equity for family distribution and home improvements. Red flags appeared immediately in our fraud detection system. After ending the call, I contacted Lindsay Moore, a real estate attorney who had handled several of my investment properties. They did what? Lindsay exclaimed after I explained the situation. Megan, that's mortgage fraud and forgery. Those are serious crimes. I know, I said, my voice breaking. But they're my family. Family or not, you need to protect yourself, Lindsay advised. I'm sending over a ceasing and desist letter to prevent further attempts. Meanwhile, gather all documentation related to the property. I spent the morning in a daze, pulling together mortgage statements, the deed, tax records, and our informal rental agreement. Around noon, My phone lit up with a text from Heather. You called the mortgage company? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Way to escalate things. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to my parents' neighborhood, parking a block away. I needed to understand what they'd been planning without my knowledge. While they were typically out on Monday afternoons, Dad at his chess club, Mom at her book group, I used my spare key to enter. I felt strange, like an intruder in a property I legally owned. In the home office, I found what I was looking for. A folder labeled House Documents contained multiple disturbing items. 1. Printouts of home equity loan information. 2. Notes about distribution with amounts allocated to each family member. Robert and Susan, parents, $200,000. Ryan, $150,000. Heather, $100,000. Home improvements, $50,000. 3. A practice sheet with attempts to copy my signature. 4. A letter from a different mortgage company declining their application. 5. Printouts of state residency laws, highlighted sections suggesting tenants could claim ownership after 6 months, a complete misinterpretation of adverse possession laws. Most shocking was a chain of family emails I found open on my father's computer. The conversation had begun 3 months ago, just weeks after they'd moved in. Ryan, did Megan mention how much equity is in the house already? Dad, she put down almost 30%. That's money just sitting there doing nothing. Heather, do you think she'd loan against it to help with my student loans? Mom, she already said no to Ryan's business loan. She's become so selfish with her money. Ryan, it's not like she lives there. We could get a family loan without even telling her. Dad, let me look into our options. The conversation evolved over weeks, from asking me for money, to discussing how to access the equity without me, to planning the Sunday dinner confrontation. In one message, Ryan had written, I accessed her laptop last month when she was helping Mom in the garden. Her banking password was saved. The house isn't her only asset. She's sitting on over $1 million in investments while I can barely make rent. I felt physically ill. While I helped Mom plant her dream garden, my brother had been violating my privacy, my trust. The final email was from yesterday evening, after I'd left. Dad, dinner didn't go as planned. Megan left the keys, but I'm worried about the legal implications she mentioned. Ryan, she's bluffing. I've already spoken to a guy who says occupancy establishes rights. Heather, should we change the locks? And Carol, my friend's daughter, had a similar situation. After 6 months, the property was considered abandoned to the residents. It was all based on misunderstandings of property law, but the intent was clear. They'd been planning to essentially steal my house and use its equity as a family piggy bank. As I was reading, I heard the front door open. Hastily, I took photos of the documents with my phone and slipped out the back door, making it to my car just as my father's sedan pulled into the driveway. Back at my apartment, I searched my laptop for any signs of intrusion. Sure enough, my password manager showed logins to my banking and investment accounts from dates when I wasn't at my parents' house. I changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and then sat on my balcony overlooking Elliott Bay, trying to process the betrayal. My phone rang constantly that evening, calls from my parents, Ryan, even Aunt Carol. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages ranged from angry accusations to tearful pleading, but none acknowledged what they'd tried to do. Instead of responding, I listened to the final voicemail repeatedly. Megan, it's Mom. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about this. All we want is financial security. After all we've done for you, raising you, supporting you, this house should be our retirement plan. You have so much already. Don't be selfish, honey. Family shares. Those last 2 words echoed in my mind. Family shares. But sharing, I realized, shouldn't mean taking. It shouldn't mean forgery, fraud, and betrayal. By Tuesday morning, I had 27 missed calls and 42 text messages. Finally, I decided to answer when my mother called again. Megan. Finally. Your father and I have been worried sick. Have you? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Of course. You disappeared after dinner and then called the mortgage company? How could you do that to us? I took a deep breath. Mom, you and Dad tried to transfer my property and take out a fraudulent loan. The mortgage company called me. It's not fraudulent if it's family, she insisted. This is what families do for each other. Forge signatures? Access accounts without permission? Plan behind each other's backs. Don't be dramatic, she sighed. We raised you for 18 years. We paid for your food, your clothes, your first car. You think that was free? The implication stunned me. Are you saying I owe you for raising me? All children owe their parents, she stated as if it were obvious. In our day, children took care of their parents in old age. It was expected. I am taking care of you, I said. That's why I bought you a house. But you keep control, my father interjected, apparently on speakerphone. Real support means trusting us to make our own decisions. Like defrauding a mortgage company? See? This is why we had to take matters into our own hands, he said. You always think you know better than everyone else. I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. Dad, what were you planning to do with the equity money? A pause. Home improvements. Retirement security. And Ryan's portion? And Heather's. Another pause. Family helps family. Your brother has a business opportunity. Your sister has student loans. So you were planning to pull equity from my house to give cash to my siblings? Our house, my mother corrected. And yes, that's what families do. You have plenty of money, Megan. You wouldn't even miss it. That's not the point. The point is, my father interrupted, you've become selfish. Success has changed you. You used to understand family obligations. Before I could respond, my phone beeped with another call, Ryan. I need to go, I said. Don't you dare hang up on us, my father warned. We're not finished discussing this. But I ended the call, switching to Ryan's. How could you? He started immediately. Mom and Dad are devastated. How could I? How could you access my laptop and bank accounts without permission? I was just trying to understand our family's financial situation, he defended. By committing identity theft? By planning to steal equity from my property. It's not stealing if it's family, he echoed our mother's sentiment. And it's not like you need the money. You have what, 12 properties? Meanwhile, I'm trying to start a business with no support. I worked for everything I have, Ryan. No one gave it to me. He scoffed. You got lucky in real estate. Some of us haven't had the same opportunities. We grew up in the same household. Yeah, but Mom and Dad pushed you to succeed. They focused everything on you, the golden child. Heather and I never got the same attention. This revisionist history was news to me. That's not how I remember it. Of course not. You were too busy becoming successful, Megan, to notice the rest of us struggling. Before I could respond, my phone beeped again, Heather this time. The pattern repeated. Each family member called to express their disappointment in me, each justified their actions as appropriate because family, and each implied I was selfish for having financial boundaries. Aunt Carol called last. In my day, she lectured, family property was family property. Your grandmother gave your father and me our first house. She gave it to you, I clarified. She didn't let you take out loans against her property without her knowledge. Details she dismissed. The point is, family takes care of family. Your parents won't live forever, Megan. That house will be yours again someday. What's the harm in letting them access some equity now when they need it? The harm is in the dishonesty, I said. In the forged signatures. In the broken trust. By Wednesday, the calls shifted from family to extended contacts. My mother's book club friends texted to express disappointment in my abandonment of my parents. My father's former colleagues called to mediate the situation. Even my high school volleyball coach reached out, having heard I was denying my parents' retirement security. The narrative had spread, twisted. Selfish Megan, withholding resources from her struggling family. Ungrateful Megan, forgetting her parents' sacrifices. No mention of the forgery. No mention of the unauthorized loan application. No mention of the privacy violations. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, truly alone for the first time in my life. Family had always been my foundation, my motivation for success. Now that foundation was revealed to be built on expectations I'd never agreed to, obligations I'd never undertaken. I cycled through emotions: betrayal, anger, grief, doubt. Was I truly selfish? Was financial independence incompatible with family loyalty? Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Heather, Mom's crying herself to sleep every night. I hope you're happy. I wasn't happy. I was heartbroken. But beneath the heartbreak, a new emotion was forming: resolve. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, honesty, and healthy boundaries. And it was time to establish all three. Thursday morning, I called into work, requesting personal days for the remainder of the week. As a partner, I rarely took time off, and my assistant Janet sounded concerned. Everything okay, Megan? Family situation, I explained vaguely. I need some time to handle it. Take what you need, she assured me. The Anderson portfolio review can wait till Monday. With work temporarily set aside, I drove to Lindsay Moore's law office in downtown Seattle. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind that fresh, clean scent that momentarily made everything feel possible. Lindsay greeted me with a hug and coffee in her corner office overlooking the Sound. I've reviewed everything, she said, gesturing to the documentation I'd sent her yesterday. Your family has no legal claim to the property. The mortgage is in your name, the deed is in your name, and the rental agreement they signed acknowledges your ownership. So legally, I'm protected? Absolutely. But Megan, she leaned forward, this isn't just a legal issue. It's a family crisis. I nodded, throat tight. I know. You have several options, Lindsay continued. 1, you could press charges for the forgery and attempted fraud. 2, you could evict them. They violated the terms of your rental agreement. 3, you could sell the property and remove the temptation entirely. None of those options felt right. Despite everything, I couldn't imagine pressing charges against my parents or making them homeless. What about option 4? I asked. Establishing clear boundaries while preserving the relationship? Lindsay smiled sadly. That's the hardest option, but yes, it's possible. It requires both parties to want it, though. We spent the next hour outlining a structured approach. Lindsay drafted a new, formal lease agreement with clear terms. We documented the forgery evidence, not to press charges, but to have as leverage if needed. She connected me with a financial therapist who specialized in family money dynamics. Money amplifies existing relationship patterns, Lindsay explained. It rarely creates new ones. Whatever dysfunction existed in your family before is just being magnified by your success. From Lindsay's office, I went directly to meet Grace Williams, my first mentor in real estate and the closest thing I had to a second mother. At 68, Grace had navigated her own family financial dramas and emerged with both boundaries and relationships intact. We met at her favorite cafe near Green Lake, where she listened without interruption to the whole sordid story. I'm not surprised, she finally said, stirring her tea. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. You have? Of course. First-generation wealth creators often face this. Your success challenges your family's narrative about themselves, about money, about what's possible. It's easier to vilify your boundaries than examine their own choices. But what do? I asked, feeling like a new investor again, seeking her wisdom. You stand firm, she said simply. Not cruel, not vindictive, but firm. This isn't about the house anymore, Megan. It's about teaching people how to treat you. I'm afraid I'll lose them, I admitted, voice breaking. Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You might, temporarily. But what's the alternative? Letting them take advantage of you forever? That's not love from either side. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Alan Peters, the financial therapist Lindsay had recommended. His office felt warm, non-judgmental, a space where I could finally acknowledge the complicated emotions swirling inside me. "You're experiencing financial abuse," he stated after hearing my story. "It's particularly difficult to recognize when it comes from family because we're conditioned to believe family is always acting in our best interest. They think they are," I defended automatically. "They believe family resources should be shared. But only in one direction, it seems," he observed. "Has your brother offered to share his future business profits with you? Has your sister offered to help when she's more financially stable?" I hadn't considered that. The sharing my family envisioned flowed only toward them, never outward. "Your generation often faces this," Dr. Peters continued. "Baby boomer parents who expected traditional financial support in old age, confronting children who must build financial independence in a different economic landscape." We discussed strategies for the confrontation I knew was coming. Role-playing difficult conversations. Identifying my emotional triggers. Preparing for manipulation tactics. "They'll try to make you feel guilty," he warned. "They'll bring up childhood sacrifices, question your love, possibly threaten to cut you off emotionally. Are you prepared for that?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I need to be." By Friday, my plan was taking shape. I spent the day securing my financial accounts further, collecting documentation, and preparing the property for possible outcomes. I changed the locks, documented the current condition with photos, and backed up evidence of the forgery attempts to multiple secure locations. I also built my support system. I called friends I'd neglected while building my career, reconnected with colleagues who'd faced similar situations, and even joined an online support group for first-generation wealth builders navigating family expectations. "You're not alone in this," my friend Diane assured me over dinner. My parents remortgaged their house to give my brother startup money, lost everything, and then expected me to buy them a new house because I had extra. "What did you do?" I asked. "I helped them find an affordable rental and set boundaries. They didn't speak to me for 6 months. Now we have a better relationship than ever because it's built on honesty, not exploitation." That night, I wrote out my non-negotiables. 1. The house remains legally mine. 2. No unauthorized loan applications or equity access. 3. Formal lease agreement with market-appropriate terms. 4. Financial counseling for the entire family. 5. Complete transparency about finances going forward. 6. Acknowledgement of an apology for the violation of trust. I also defined what I was willing to offer. 1. Continued below-market rent. 2. Help establishing retirement accounts for my parents. 3. Financial education resources for my siblings. 4. A structured way to address genuine family financial emergencies. 5. Family therapy to rebuild trust. By Sunday morning, 1 week after the disastrous dinner, I felt prepared. Not confident, not eager, but prepared. I texted my parents. "I'll be at the house at 2 p.m. to discuss the situation. Please have Ryan and Heather there. I'm coming with solutions, not accusations. I hope you are willing to listen." My father's response was immediate. "This is our home. You come on our terms, not yours." I stood firm. "This is my property. I'm offering an opportunity to resolve this respectfully." 2 p.m. At 1:58 p.m., I parked outside the house I'd purchased with such hope and love just 6 months earlier. In my briefcase were 2 sets of documents, the legal enforcement papers Lindsay had prepared, and the reconciliation agreement I hoped we wouldn't need. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the path to the front door, ready to reclaim not just my property rights, but my self-respect. When I knocked on the door of my own property at precisely 2 p.m., my mother answered, her expression a mixture of defensiveness and uncertainty. "You changed the locks," she accused immediately. "Yes," I acknowledged, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. After discovering attempted fraud on my property, it seemed prudent. The living room had been arranged like an intervention. My father in his armchair, Ryan and Heather on the couch, even Aunt Carol perched on a dining chair dragged in for the occasion. Their postures were defensive, arms crossed, faces set. "We're all here as you demanded," my father said. "Though I don't appreciate being summoned in my own home." I placed my briefcase on the coffee table. "First, let's clarify something. This is legally my home. I own it. I hold the mortgage. I pay the property taxes and insurance. These are facts, not opinions." "Megan," my mother began. "Please let me finish," I said firmly. "I've listened to everyone's calls and messages this week. Now it's my turn to speak." To my surprise, they fell silent. "1 week ago, you demanded I surrender ownership of this house. When I declined, you attempted to forge my signature on transfer documents and loan applications. You accessed my private financial accounts without permission. You planned to extract $500,000 in equity and distribute it among yourselves." "That's not exactly," Ryan started. "I have the evidence," I cut him off, patting my briefcase. "Documented, copied, and safely stored with my attorney. What you attempted constitutes forgery, fraud, and identity theft. These are felonies, not family disagreements." The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw tightened. "Are you threatening us?" he demanded. "I'm stating facts," I replied calmly. "I have 2 paths forward in this briefcase. The first involves legal enforcement, criminal charges, eviction proceedings, and restraining orders." Heather gasped. Aunt Carol muttered something under her breath. "The second path," I continued, "involves reconciliation, boundaries, and rebuilding trust. That's the path I prefer, but it requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing and commitment to change from all of you." "So you're giving us ultimatums now?" Ryan scoffed. "I'm offering choices with clear consequences," I corrected. "Something that's been missing from our family dynamic." I opened my briefcase and removed the reconciliation agreement. This document outlines a path forward. You continue living here under a formal lease agreement at below market rent. The property remains legally mine, but I commit to maintaining it as your home. In exchange, you acknowledge the boundary violations, agree to financial counseling, and commit to transparency going forward. "Financial counseling," my father repeated incredulously. "We're not children." "Children don't commit forgery," I pointed out. "This isn't punishment. It's protection for all of us. The counseling helps us develop healthy financial boundaries and communication." My mother took the agreement, skimming it with growing dismay. "You want us to pay more rent?" she asked, pointing to a clause. "Yes, still 40% below market rate, but enough to establish a proper landlord-tenant relationship." The token amount was clearly insufficient to establish respect for boundaries. Ryan stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're punishing us for trying to access resources that should belong to the family anyway." "I've provided resources," I said evenly. "A home worth nearly $800,000. Below market rent. Security in retirement that you wouldn't otherwise have. What I haven't provided is unlimited access to my assets or permission to commit crimes in my name." "Always about the money with you," he muttered. "No," I corrected. "Always about respect. About honesty. About trust. The very things this family seems to have forgotten." My father hadn't spoken, his face unreadable as he studied the agreement. "And if we refuse," he finally asked. I took a deep breath. "Then I'll be forced to pursue the legal option." "I don't want that, Dad. It would devastate me to press charges against my own family. But I will not allow myself to be exploited, even by people I love." "You'd really do that?" my mother whispered. "Send your own parents to jail? You were really willing to commit fraud against your own daughter?" I countered. The room fell silent. For perhaps the first time, they were confronting the reality of what they'd attempted. Heather was the first to crack. "I didn't know about the forgery," she said quietly. "I knew about accessing equity, but not about faking your signature." That was Ryan's idea, my father admitted, throwing my brother under the bus without hesitation. Ryan exploded. Are you serious? It was your idea. You said Megan would never notice if we... He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was confessing. This blame shifting is exactly the problem, I interjected. Everyone was willing to participate in taking from me, but no one wants responsibility. My mother began to cry, soft hiccuping sobs that normally would have melted my resolve. I steeled myself against the manipulation. I didn't raise you to be so cold, she said between sobs. You raised me to be independent and responsible, I corrected. I'm simply expecting the same from my family. And Carol, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Robert, Susan, the girl has a point. What you did, what we encouraged, wasn't right. My father's head snapped up in surprise. Carol, I got caught up in it too, she admitted. The resentment, the entitlement. But attempting forgery? That crosses a line we weren't raised to cross. Her unexpected support shifted something in the room. My father's rigid posture softened slightly. We were desperate, he said quietly. Retirement looming, inadequate savings, medical bills. You could have talked to me, I said, my own voice softening. Asked for help directly instead of trying to take it. I've never refused reasonable requests. You refused Ryan's business loan, my mother pointed out. Because it wasn't a sound investment, I replied. I said no to a specific request, not to helping generally. Slowly, painfully, we began to talk, really talk. About money, yes, but more importantly about expectations, assumptions, and the unspoken resentments that had been building for years. My success had made them feel inadequate. Their financial struggles had made me feel responsible. We'd all been operating from scripts we'd never consciously examined. After 2 hours of difficult conversation, Ryan stormed out, unwilling to accept the new reality. Heather, however, stayed, gradually moving from defensive to contemplative. I was jealous, she finally admitted. You make everything look so easy. It wasn't easy, I told her. It was hard work, careful planning, and sacrifices you never saw. My father, proudest and therefore most resistant, eventually sighed deeply. I don't like these terms, he said, tapping the agreement. But I understand why they're necessary. They're not punishment, I reiterated. They're the foundation for rebuilding trust. By evening, we had a tentative agreement. My parents would remain in the house under the new lease terms. They would attend financial counseling. We would have monthly family meetings about money expectations and boundaries. What about Ryan? My mother worried. His choices are his own, I said. The door remains open when he's ready to respect boundaries. As I prepared to leave, my father stopped me at the door. I was wrong, he said simply, the words clearly costing him. Not just about the forgery, but about what I said last week. Your success isn't something to punish you for. It's something I should have celebrated more. It wasn't a complete resolution. Trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight. But it was a start. As I drove home that evening, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. But because I'd finally stood up for myself in the most important relationship arena of all, family. The hardest boundaries to set are often the most necessary ones. 6 months have passed since that confrontational Sunday. Spring has given way to summer, then fall, and Seattle prepares for another rain-soaked winter. The physical seasons mirror the emotional ones our family has weathered, turbulent change followed by tentative new growth. The first month after our confrontation was the hardest. My parents adhered to the letter of our agreement, but struggled with the spirit. Financial counseling sessions were attended with minimal participation. Rent was paid exactly on the due date, not a day earlier. Our monthly family meetings felt stilted, formal. Ryan remained distant, refusing to sign the agreement or acknowledge any wrongdoing. Call me when you stop being a dictator, was his parting text. It hurt, but I recognized the deflection for what it was, easier to blame me than examine his own behavior. Heather surprised me. Once the initial defensiveness faded, she engaged genuinely with the process. During our third family meeting, she brought a personal budget for review, asking for feedback rather than handouts. "I've been thinking about what you said," she admitted over coffee one rainy afternoon. "About working for what you have. I've applied to a master's program in education administration. It would mean better pay, more security." "That's wonderful," I told her sincerely. "I can't afford it without loans," she continued, "but I'm not asking you to pay. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." That conversation marked a turning point. Not because Heather was pursuing education, though I was proud of her for that, but because she was taking responsibility for her choices without expecting rescue. By the third month, subtle shifts appeared in my parents' behavior too. The financial counselor reported increased engagement. My father began researching part-time consulting work to supplement his retirement. My mother started a small bookkeeping service for neighborhood businesses. The counselor helped us realize we were living in fear, my mother confessed during our July family meeting. Fear of not having enough. Fear of dependency. "We projected that fear onto you, making it your responsibility. We should have planned better," my father acknowledged. "Depending on our children wasn't fair to any of you." These admissions weren't easy for them. A lifetime of financial anxiety doesn't disappear with a few counseling sessions. But acknowledgement was the first step toward change. In August, something remarkable happened. My parents made their rent payment with a note. "We've calculated the market rate for comparable properties. The difference between what we pay and market value is approximately $1,200 monthly. We're depositing this amount into a separate account to eventually repay you for your generosity." They didn't need to do this. I hadn't asked for it. But their voluntary acknowledgement of my contribution meant more than the money ever could. Ryan's journey back took longer. In September, I received a text, "Can we talk?" We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. He looked thinner, tired. My business venture failed, he admitted without preamble. The investor pulled out. I waited, wondering if this was leading to another request for money. "You were right to refuse co-signing," he continued, surprising me. The numbers never made sense. "I just wanted a shortcut." "What will you do now?" I asked cautiously. "I've taken a management position at Kelsey's Restaurant Group. Entry-level, but stable. Health insurance, 401k matching." It wasn't an explicit apology, but from Ryan, this acknowledgement was significant progress. "I'm still angry," he admitted. "Not really at you anymore, but at myself. For expecting rescue instead of building something on my own. It's never too late to start," I told him. He didn't sign the family agreement that day, but he did come to the October family meeting. Progress comes in small steps. Throughout these months, I've been on my own journey. The betrayal had shaken my foundation, forcing me to examine my relationship with success, money, and family obligation. With Dr. Peter's guidance, I recognized my own unhealthy patterns. I'd used financial success as a substitute for emotional connection, providing materially where I struggled to connect personally. My parents' betrayal hurt so deeply because the house represented love I couldn't express in other ways. This realization led to changes in my professional life too. I began mentoring younger women in real estate investment, sharing not just technical knowledge, but emotional wisdom about boundaries and family expectations. I created a workshop called First Generation Wealth, Navigating Family Dynamics, which I now present quarterly. The response has been overwhelming. So many others walking the same path, facing the same challenges. Last month, I finalized a new arrangement for my parents' home. We established a formal trust that provides them lifetime residency while protecting my investment. The agreement includes provisions for home maintenance, eventual disposition, and clear boundaries around equity access. "This feels fair," my father said after reviewing the documents with their own attorney. "Secure for us, protected for you." Yesterday, we celebrated Thanksgiving in that house, the first holiday where money tensions didn't simmer beneath the surface. The conversation flowed naturally, with genuine interest in each other's lives beyond financial matters. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside. "I never properly apologized," she said softly, "for what we tried to do, for betraying your trust. It's behind us now," I assured her. "No, it needs to be said. We were wrong, Megan. Completely wrong. Not just legally, but morally. I'm so sorry we put our fear above our integrity, above our love for you." The words washed over me like healing rain. As I look toward the future, I carry powerful lessons from this painful chapter. True generosity comes with boundaries, not conditions. Without boundaries, giving becomes depletion, not generosity. Financial success doesn't exempt you from family dysfunction, it often magnifies it, forcing issues into the open that might otherwise remain hidden. Money is never just about money. It's about values, power, security, and worth. When conflicts arise around money, the deeper issue is rarely financial. Most importantly, I've learned that standing firm in your boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Not just for your protection, but for the health of the relationship itself. Without boundaries, respect cannot flourish. My family's story isn't a perfect resolution. Ryan still struggles with resentment. My parents still worry about retirement. I still navigate the complex emotions of betrayal and forgiveness. But we're building something stronger than what we had before, a relationship based on honesty, respect, and appropriate boundaries rather than unspoken expectations and resentment. If you're facing similar challenges with family and finances, remember that you're not alone. Setting boundaries with family is the hardest emotional work you'll ever do, but also the most necessary. Your success is not an obligation to sacrifice your boundaries. Your love for family doesn't require enabling harmful behavior. Have you experienced financial pressure from family? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe. There's so much more to discuss about navigating these complex waters. Share this with someone who might need permission to set their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, love and boundaries aren't opposites. They're complements. One cannot truly exist without the other.